Hi and welcome everyone to the group. Thank you so much for joining me. I spent way too much time in the sun yesterday, which normally is not a problem, but yesterday literally I was the whole day in the sun. It was so hot. And so I try to choose a lighting that doesn't show how red I am. And it's actually a lot better. And just for future reference, if you ever get slightly burnt by the sun, first of all, know that the more that you detox, the less you actually do get burned by the sun, unless you spend the whole day like I did. And when you do have a bit of redness, which can happen, then you simply put on apple cider vinegar on your face, followed by either aloe vera gel or a little bit of hi Chrissy, or a little bit of coconut oil. And that actually helps super quick. I mean, that's why I didn't do a video last night, because I was burning up. And anyway, so the flower is to detract from the redness. I don't know if it helps. But so yeah, welcome and thank you for joining me in this group where we are going to be diving deep. And my whole purpose for this group really is to be able to have sort of like the good doctor, the modern doctor. Hi, Emily. Love from Cape Town. To have the good doctor's office at your disposal for all your questions, and to really get into the depths of healing. And my wish for everyone is to understand how the body really works, how healing really occurs in the body, so that basically we can make a check to not worry, to not have to worry anymore about our health. And obviously that is a process of learning, and as we learn for ourselves, we're able to then help and empower our family and others and take it out. And so that is really my vision. That's what I'm working towards, to eliminate health worries. And I know it seems like such a big task, but I mean, we always have to reach for the stars, and maybe we'll land on the moon, right? So what I want to, and I did make notes so that I can not derail too much. And I thank you for all your questions, because and feedback. I mean, that is how I know what to give to you and how to assist you, because without that, all of our experiences are different and what we need is different. So I thank you so much, and keep them coming. And obviously I can't do it all at once, but I will go through it all and sort of put it in different sections and create files, which we can then find under the files in the group. There's a link, and I'll show you where that is if you don't know where it is. And create videos to answer your questions. Some of them I can then put on YouTube, or snippets of them, so that people can find, oh, okay, I can get answers there. So it's actually, you are helping me really putting this whole body of work together. So the first thing that I want to address is because that's such a big one, and I know I've talked about it before, and I'm gonna speak about it over and over again. The understanding is so crucial around the fact that the first stage of healing is really the removal of obstruction. And so many of you ask me on this group and on other group, is it okay to take this and this for my healing? Do I need this and this vitamin, mineral, protein for my healing? No healing happens through what we take in and through nutrition. As in, healing doesn't happen from what we add to our diet, to our body. That's the whole supplement medicinal way of thinking, which is treatment based, which is, so there's a certain chemistry that happens in the body at any given point in time. There's a certain set of chemistry in a healthy body, and there's a certain set of chemistry that happens with any dis-ease. And when that set of chemistry is taken out of balance from a healthy body, disease happens. So now when you start adding supplements or medication, that is fixing the body chemistry, which it's a clever way of doing things, right? I mean, I know very little about chemistry, but I know I did my chemistry laboratory experiments in school, and we know that if we add certain things, there's a reaction. So for every action, there is a reaction. And that's essentially how medicine works. That is how the supplement world works, that we create with something that we add, we create a reaction. And that is valid up to a certain point. But when we understand that the main problem why really we as a society as a whole are so diseased and are so obstructed and have come so far from our original state of health, that literally, nowadays it is very, very hard to find a true specimen of health. It's a rarity. And when we understand all of that, then we understand that we need to go beyond chemistry, that this whole business of fixing the general chemistry is not enough. But we need to actually go and remove the deeper layers of obstruction in the body that have layered themselves over not just our generation. We are already born with layers of obstruction, with layers of toxicity. And so when we understand that, then we understand that there's only so much we can do with medicine and so much we can do with supplements to actually affect our health at a cellular level. And that is why it is so important now more than ever to understand that we need to remove the layers of obstruction in the body on a cellular level so that we can actually reestablish a healthy ecosystem. And I always relate it to, whether you know about permaculture and how that works, or whether, you've done some construction work, you buy an old house and it's not good enough to go and put new plaster on or new tiles on top of the old ones, new electrical system on top of the old ones. You first need to actually strip the old house down to its bare, healthy bones, and then you can start building on top of that, right? That is where you then do your rebuilding, and all of a sudden, out of this old, dilapidated house, you've got a beautiful, new, gorgeous house. And that is the same thing that we are doing with our bodies, especially in the process of fasting, dry fasting, fruit fasting. We are actually stripping, allowing the body to strip itself down to remove obstruction. So it's just like when we have, cement splattered over walls and so forth. We need to take a solvent that will take that cement off, and then we need to sweep it. And the same thing is in our body. All the layers of obstruction from years and generations of wrongful eating, of taking medication, and ultimately also of stress, internal stress, which creates acidity, which then lends itself to create more obstruction in the body. We need to carry this obstruction out. But before we carry it out, we need to scrub it off the walls of our various organs. The colon, for example, being one of the main ones. I'm sure you've all seen images of arteries that are filled with plaque. And what happens when the arteries fill with plaque? They fill, so if this is your tube, the obstruction is formed around, right? But you still will get a neat blood flow. And so that's why when I look into a dirty colon, then it looks as if it's clear and not with obstruction. And in many cases, they'll even say it's pink, which, that's the part that sort of boggles me, but I'll get to that. So of course, you're still going to have flow through, but the flow will be obstructed, even if it's just with a millimeter or maybe even less. But that level of obstruction in our amazing, incredible machines that these bodies are, that millimeter or half a millimeter or a tenth of a millimeter of obstruction still is enough obstruction to, over time, create havoc in the body, because everything in our body has an incredible symphony, right? It all works in conjunction and symphony with each other. And the minute that something is out of tune, it will inevitably affect the whole. That is how it works. And so when we talk about removing obstruction from the colon, from the various organs, which all of our organs really are spongeous material, besides our bones, and yet even our bones actually are sponges, it's just hardened, but our whole body is a sponge. And, you know, there's nothing really hard in the body besides the bones, which again are actually at the end of the day also porous. So all of these acids that we take in, all these acidic foods that we take in, that create an acidic environment inside of ourselves, that affects the tissue, and it creates layers of acidity, which then, because the body is so clever, gets deposited in the organs. And it's a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, but over 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, it's a lot. On the other hand, when we really start looking at things that way, we can also understand just how amazing our bodies are and how much they can take. You know, it is remarkable that our bodies can actually take such a level of obstruction and still, for the most part, function really, really well. You know, I have plenty of clients who they look amazing at the age of 60 and yet, or reasonably well, and yet when you actually go and look at how they've lived their life, you think, wow, I mean, it is amazing that they're still functioning that well. And that is where, you know, we all know that we have the capability and the possibility and all the knowledge and certainly the life infrastructure nowadays. We don't need to go hunt for food, etc. We can absolutely, we have the capacity to live until 120 easily and well. You know, we don't need to be decrepit at the age of 80 or 90. We can be in full vitality up until the age of 120. We know that now. Science knows that it is possible. But it's only possible when we start clearing our bodies and actually allowing a healthy ecosystem. And that's where, for me, it's so poignant, because as within, so without. All the mess that we've got happening in the world, in the soil, that is the outside reflection of what actually is going on inside. And that can sound so woo-woo, but when we start understanding it, it's like, of course, you know, we are all one ecosystem, and there is no separation between the outside and the inside. So when we understand that the first stage of healing happens through the removal of obstruction, then we can understand that we do not need to worry about nutrition, feeding ourselves the right food. It's like, forget all about that. You've got enough nutrition in your body for plenty of months. So don't even worry about that. You know, we all have. What we need to do is remove the obstruction so that the body can find its own balance. Once your body is clean, and I'm experiencing that progressively, you know, more and more and more and more, that your body will inevitably communicate with you what it needs. And it does so by giving you very clear messages, as in, if you need greens or the minerals that are in spinach, be sure that when you go to the supermarket, your eye will fall on the spinach and your senses will go, oh, that sounds really good. And then you go and you buy the spinach. It's like, that's your sign. And that is when you start becoming in tune with your body, because that is how we work. Or you start fantasizing about eating certain foods, or you start craving particular flavors and combinations, like, well, because that is what you need. Which does not mean that you need it forever. Sometimes a week of eating those kind of foods fills the supply and gets you to a point where you may not need it for about 6 months, you know. So, for example, when I came off my first 40-day fast, in spite of all recommendations, all I craved was fermented vegetables. Like, I could have just guzzled, you know, bottle after bottle. And I wasn't at the time really good at making them. I still am not. And so I would buy them, and obviously to buy them, they're very expensive. I was like, I don't care. That is what I'm buying. That is all I want. And it felt like this craving will never end. And eventually, you know, it probably lasted like maybe 5-6 weeks. And literally, that's all I ate. That wrapped in seaweed, in you know, the seaweed sheets. And eventually that craving was done. So my body clearly needed all that good bacteria because I was so imbalanced before. And now I have every now and again, I have a spoon just sort of for the fun of it, and that craving is gone. So, you know, the body will always tell you what it needs, but don't worry about feeding, worry about removing obstruction, and then it will come naturally. And so that is why we focus on dry fasting as one of the first practices, because dry fasting is it's the highest form of healing for the body. When we dry fast, we put the body into a process called autophagy. All processes of fasting do that, but dry fasting does it the most efficient and the quickest. So the process of autophagy is when basically the body turns... Oh, that's my... Sorry, I'm trying to think what to do here. Okay, anyway, I'll continue. Let me just a second to open the door. Sorry, these are the issues of working from home and doing live videos. Grace, can you please close the door for Peter? So dry fasting is the highest form of healing. And the reason why that is because it puts the body into a process of autophagy. And the process of autophagy is where the body reverses its mechanics and basically starts cannibalizing its own diseased cells for metabolic water. Does that make sense? So it's basically a process of, cannibalism, and where the healthy cells, because all of a sudden you're not getting any food or water from the outside, the body, clever as it is, starts reversing a mechanism and starts drawing out water by burning up diseased cells and turning that burning up process, that incineration process, into metabolic water, which is the finest water for our cells. And that goes directly to feed the healthy cells. So it's a complete rejuvenation process for our cells. And obviously the great thing about dry fasting is that you are incinerating those cells that are diseased, that are not functioning to its optimum. The other amazing thing that happens after the process of dry fasting, so when you start rehydrating the body now, and obviously dry fasting is a positive stressor. And I'll talk about that more in a separate video. What are all the positive stressors for the body? Because positive stress is what the body needs to grow strong. That is why we exercise. That is why we do breath work, because we actually activate positive stressors in the body that tells the body to strengthen itself. Whereas negative, is that the plasmatic effect, also the autophagy? Okay, I'll get to that. But the positive stressors in the body don't affect the adrenal system in a negative way, whereas negative stress affect the body in a negative way, and therefore the adrenals. Which in many ways, like, well, what is the difference? The difference is actually your intention and predisposition. So for example, cold therapy is also a positive stressor. If I go and plunge my body into a cold water, cold ocean or whatever, ice bath water, that is a positive stressor. It teaches my body to become stronger, a little bit like flexing your muscles, like working out with weights. But if I go into the cold water with anger, with resistance, and I'm there and I contract my body like this, I am stressing my adrenals. Whereas if I go into that water and I acknowledge it, well, it's my choice. I am opening up to this experience. I am relaxing into the experience because I know that this experience is positive for me. The body will respond positively. And you can do that exercise for yourself, that experiment for yourself. Have a cold shower, maybe first a hot one, and then just before you switch to cold, you can really contract your body and go like, I don't want to do this, and you contract, and then you move to cold, and you have that cold shower in a contracted state, and then you feel into, how does that feel? Not so good. It will be a negative stressor. But if you have that same cold shower before turning cold, you go, okay, I'm just opening myself up to this cold water, which is actually strengthening my immune system, which is strengthening my body, and I fully receive this healing, and I'm relaxing into it, and then observe how you feel afterwards. Completely different experience. And that is the perfect example of how you feel, how you learn to see what stress, negative stress, really does to your body, and how easily you can stress your adrenals, and how easily you can feed your adrenals and your whole body with positive energy. And that actually it's not so woo-woo at all. It is very much chemistry that happens in the body. So in a dry fast, this process of autophagy, it is different to the plasmatic effect, because when we talk about plasma, I think you're referring to the Master Fast system, and I will speak about that in a different video, because it is very interesting. So when we talk about plasmatic effects, we talk about field interaction, and this is where, me not being very good at chemistry, it's hard to explain, but the way that I understand it is simply it's alchemy, right? Everything, when we put one substance and another substance together, we form a third entity. It's no different to, I am great on my own. My husband is great on his own. But when we come together, we create a third entity, which is the beloved, which is the relationship, which is better than the two parts alone. So the plasmatic effect that my husband and I create together is a particular vibration. It's a particular not only constellation, it's a particular reality, actually. It's a particular reality that neither of us could really tap into without one another. And of course, it doesn't mean, like, God forbid, if we were to get divorced, doesn't mean that we wouldn't create an amazing reality with somebody else. But the particular reality that me and him create together is irreplicable. Only me and him can create that. And so it's the same thing when, that's the body chemistry. What happens in the body chemistry when, for example, we eat only fruits, which goes to answer the question, why is not even 1 cup of coffee acceptable? Because if we're having, say, all fruits or all mucus lean, we are creating a particular set of chemistry in the body that allows the healing. So it's not so much the fruit themselves that are healing the body. It's the set of chemistry that is created in the body through the eating of fruits that create the healing. Does that make sense? So if I now, in that set of chemistry that is created through eating fruits or through eating mucus lean, I now put the coffee, even just a little bit, the whole set of chemistry is changed. And we know that from our chemistry experiments, right? That if you only put a little bit of something, you can create an explosion. And there you can't say, oh, but it was just a little bit. Well, that little bit created an explosion. And it's the same thing in our bodies. And so and for me, that's been my biggest learning, of really understanding that is what it comes down to. It's not about, because I used to think the same way. Oh, but like 1 cup of, like I'm being so good. I'm eating so well, I'm doing everything by the book. For flip's sakes, can I have 1 cup of coffee? You know, like that's not going to do damage. And I had to understand that, well, actually, it's not about that. It's not about like you being so good and not being able to have that 1 cup of coffee. It's about gaining the understanding of what that 1 cup of coffee or that 1 donut or that 1 slice of pizza, for that matter, does to the body chemistry. And when we understand that, that is also when we understand that it's not about, I mean, yes, willpower, but we'll get to that, can also come in, but that it's really about understanding how the body works. And then we can lovingly move towards treating it in the way that serves it best. And so when okay, how do we deal with a 24-hour dry fast? So initially, when you're coming off cooked foods, go slow with the dry fasting, because the reality is to change the chemistry in our body. So here also you have to understand, you've kept this chemistry, this particular set of chemistry running in your body for, in my case, it was 40 years. That I pretty much ate the same kind of foods for 40 years. Already my mother eating the same kind of foods. So I was born with that set of chemistry. I continued to perpetuate that particular set of chemistry in my body for 40 years. Now all of a sudden I want to change my chemistry so that I can change my health and I can change my body. It's going to take time. And 1 month is not going to do it. 3 months is not going to do it. It's a process. It's a slow process. So to dive right into deep sets of dry fasting, you know, to kind of like create a strong and fast effect is totally counterproductive. And that's why I always say, go slow, go as slow as you need to, with awareness, with compassion for the fact that it is hard to change our patterns, because it's not just about the chemistry, it's about all the emotions that go with it. And that is why the system, as simple as it is so complex, and it requires a lot of support, a lot of patience, a lot of awareness, a lot of willingness. So it's not easy in that sense. You know, that's why it is a lot easier to go and become paleo or become ketogenic, because you sort of follow that set of rules and you forget about everything else. This process is about becoming sovereign in your body and about really truly understanding from an embodied perspective, what is health and how does it work for you in your body, and that through your own process of taking yourself, you learn everything you need to know for your particular health. And so when you come off cooked foods, go slow with the dry fasting, play with it. And if you start feeling too dehydrated, if you start feeling, like for example, right now I'm dry fasting, and yes, of course I'm aware that I'm a little bit dry, I struggle, you know, to speak, I'm not as fluently, I mean, I can feel it, you may not, but I feel it, because yes, there is a certain dryness, you know, but I'm fine with that. I can relax into that. It's not stressing me because I've been there before. So there also, if I were to stress, I go, okay, let's not stress about it. Let's have some water or juice or whatever. And so that is then the dance of learning to feel into, can I relax into that? Can I trust my body for another hour? Yeah, I can do that. Okay, so we move forward. And we start feeling into all the emotions that arise through this process of dry fasting. And so to be aware of the emotions that come up, and especially in the process of dry fasting, because it is so unfamiliar, we can experience a lot of fear. We can experience a lot of programming that comes up, like, oh, but you're damaging your body. Oh, look at that. I'm having this thought. Okay, well, I think if I continue for another hour or 2 or 3, I know I'm not going to damage my body in any significant way, even if it were true, which it isn't. So then can I relax into that? Okay, yes, I can relax into that. And so we continue to observe the process of the mind. And then oftentimes we will feel that when we have a moment of oh, I'm so thirsty. Like earlier when I did my exercises, for a moment I was like, oh, I don't know if I can dry fast today. It's gone now. I'm actually not thirsty. I have a slightly dry mouth, but I'm not thirsty. I'm completely fine. And so that teaches you then, like, wow, look how quickly things change in the body, actually. And through that process, we learn to progress and to progress and to progress. Now, the process of hydrating ourselves on a deep cellular level takes time. And that's why I say when you come off, 40 years of eating a cooked diet, mainly, and little vegetables or little fruit, little raw, then go slow with your dry fasting. Maybe start out with 12 hours, 14 hours, and then in the rest of the time, eat a high fruit diet, hydrate with coconut water, hydrate with high water content vegetables so that your body is getting the hydration and it gets used to being hydrated on a cellular level, and then you can start pushing a little bit more with the dry fasting. At the same time, even if you're a beginner and you do dive into a 24-hour dry fast, nothing bad can really happen. You may feel bad, you may have a moment of feeling really, 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 really weak and going like, oh my goodness, no, I can't, and maybe a little bit dizzy. And by the way, the dizziness that arises through dry fasting is, on one hand, deep cellular dehydration, which obviously we are squeezing out through the process of dry fasting, because dry fasting is like a sponge. You are squeezing the sponge so that sort of the yucky water, the yucky obstruction can come out. And then as you hydrate again, the sponge expands again, being hydrated with the good hydration, which is, fruit, coconut water, or juice that you are then giving it. So do you understand? That is the process of dry fasting. You are squeezing out the bad, making space for the good, which you are then feeding. That's why, for example, if you were to dry fast and then you go, oh, well, which is complete insanity, but as an example, you then say, oh yeah, I rehydrated with a beer or with, a milkshake from McDonald's. It's like, well, now what you've done is you have opened up your tissue to receive hungrily all the junk that you just fed it. That's why it's so important that when we dry fast and when we rehydrate, that we give it good nutrition. That is when we refeed the body. So in dry fasting, we strip the body and then we hydrate and we give the body everything that it actually can utilize, which is really minerals, to rehydrate on a cellular level and refeed. Because in a hydrated body, no dis-ease. When you're hydrated on a cellular level, no dis-ease can thrive. Okay, so that makes all sense. So how to break a dry fast? As I said, with fruit, coconut water, whether you want to eat like melon. My favorite way of breaking a dry fast is either I make a juice, which is sort of my special concoction, which I will post and it's going to be in the recipe book. I use pasteurized grape juice, that's the teaching from the Master Fast. And then I mix in the juice of a whole grapefruit and maybe half a lemon or lime and some sour cherry juice concentrate, because again, all the dark berries are deeply, deeply antioxidizing and deeply healing and scrubbing to our body. So the deep dark berries is really one of the prime foods for detoxification and regeneration. And the cherries in particular are really good. Also, they regulate sleep and for pain management, and they are just obviously high in antioxidants. So they help, again, to flush out the bad and put good stuff back into the body. And that particular combination of grape juice, grapefruit, lime or lemon, and sour cherry is amazing. When I drink that after my dry, it's like my whole body just goes into like, oh, wow, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It like sings. And so they're also, you can feel the cleaner you get, the more you clean, as you start eating certain things, you will feel inevitably what actually feeds you. And so for me, it is that particular juice that my body just sings with. Papaya, melons, watermelon also, but like at the moment, I'm just obsessed with the orange melon. So that is all I'm having. I was supposed to go into a full master fast, and my body said, no, like that's all I want melons. So that's what I'm doing, dry fasting and melons. So your body will tell you what it feeds, what it needs in this moment. It may be green juices, depending on where you're at on your journey. And that's why also, when we say what is appropriate to eat. So like, let's say if somebody comes to me and they have been a raw vegan for 5 years and eating a high fruit diet, but still experience obstruction. Why? Which obviously one would say, but wow, how is that possible? Well, because they have not cleaned out the body through the process of dry fasting, through enemas, through the protocols of bentonite clay, psyllium husk, charcoal. And so even though they have switched to a very healthy diet, they can still have obstruction in the body because the scrubbing hasn't happened at a level that it needs to happen for them. So if somebody like that comes to me, then of course, I'm not going to suggest to them to go on a mucus lean diet with spelt and quinoa and nut cheese, all of that, because they are already further ahead in their cleansing game. And if I were to tell them to eat quinoa and spelt and nut cheese, they would probably feel sick. It would actually regress them. Whereas if I give those same advice, of spelt quinoa and nut cheese and so forth, like the typical mucus lean diet, to somebody who's coming off the standard American diet, or for somebody who's coming off the ketogenic diet or a paleo diet, that is going to be an advancement in their process of detoxification. So do you see how, depending on where you are at, whatever you need to eat will differ? And at the same time, you can get to a point where you have, and that sort of happened to me, like I was cleansing, being strictly raw, eating, doing obviously a lot of the longer fasting and so forth. And eventually my body kind of like, 3-4 months ago, it got to a point where it said, body and mind and spirit, because it's always everything together, where it said, okay, I've had enough of all this cleansing now. I need a break. And that meant slightly regressing, and it will happen inevitably over the course of the years, where we need to regress for a few moments, a few weeks, a month, whatever it is, regress to some, in my case, spelt and quinoa and all of that kind of stuff. And I even did have some gluten products, and I did have a piece of fish because I thought, okay, I wanted to experiment, what does it feel like? And then realizing, well, actually that didn't serve my body at all. But that is how we learn. And so never be afraid of taking a few steps back. Like nothing major can happen, if you keep it in the range of mucus lean, and like if you don't go and like binge on McDonald's after a fast or whatever, which can actually be very, very dangerous, then nothing major can happen. Are you going to feel shitty? Yes, probably. Are you going to maybe get puffy and get sore kidneys or sore liver? Yes, but you're not going to die. It's all part of the learning. And do we want to avoid these kind of harsh learnings as much as possible? Yes. But in my case, I've had my harsh learnings, but I've also learned, well, that is how I have learned the best, by making these kind of mistakes. Because then the next time when maybe I have that strong craving where I go like, no, now I need whatever, that pizza with real cheese and, real gluten or whatever, that's when I go, oh, actually, as strong as the craving is, I'm going to go make a spelt one with nut cheese, and I'm going to make it as amazing as I can possibly think of, but I'm going to love myself enough to not go over the edge, and so we learn, and that is how we progress. And if you think about it, rather progress over the course of 3-4 years and progress in an authentic way, rather than bully yourself or willpower yourself to progression by holding it all in, because eventually you're not going to be able to hold in and you are going to binge. So I always say, just to sort of briefly touch on that subject, when you have a craving, first become aware. Go, oh yeah, I really want a croissant. I'm fantasizing about a croissant. And then go, where is it coming from? What am I looking for that? And instead of then going, oh yeah, but I can't have it. No, hang on, you can have it. If you really want it, you can go and have it. But before you go and have it, let's sit down and really feel into, what are you hoping to get out of it? Why are you wanting, ooh, my flower. Why are you wanting to have the croissant? What is it going to satisfy? Like, what are you actually? And so that's where a lot of times for me, it's actually just the whole ritual of taking myself to a coffee shop and sitting down like any normal person and ordering a cappuccino and and if in Paris, all the better. And so then I feel into that fantasy, and then it's like, well, but A, you're not so normal. B, you are moving away from that whole way of living, that's your whole drive and intention. And so then I'm able to sit with, okay, well, so it's not a good idea. And yet sometimes I have, my husband and I, sometimes we do say, and it probably happens maybe 6 times a year, 8 times a year, whatever. And maybe in future it won't happen ever again, I don't know. But in the past it has happened 6, 7, 8 times a year, where we looked at each other and we said, you know what, today we are playing normal. Today we are going to have that croissant that we so think we desire. And more often than not, when we went and had it, well, sometimes it was like, wow, this is amazing. What fun, what great joy. This is also joy, yes. And then we happily went back to our old ways. And other times, we kind of went like, yes, nice, but actually our big plate of fruit that we love to have together and eat with our hands, sitting in our garden, much better, much more satisfying, But we wouldn't know that if we wouldn't every now and again go and make those mistakes. And that's why I'm all for making mistakes, and I'm all against this rigidity and sort of, even pomposity of some of the raw food people that go, oh, I no longer, I find all of that other stuff disgusting. It's like, well, we've eaten it for 40 years, and, there is still a remembrance, a cellular remembrance of what we get out of that, and there was something that we got out of that. And so it's important to kind of be able to hold both until we truly and authentically move out of that, And it's sometimes you need to get a tummy ache from eating whatever you decided to eat, and you need to feel all depressed and sluggish to then go, not beat yourself up, but to say, okay, you know what, and next time I don't need to do this again. And it's the same thing for my children. They are also learning that way. And so whenever they make a mistake, instead of going like, oh, that was so silly and whatever, I go, well, see what happens. And then you learn from your consequence. So yeah, why the longer dry fasting? As we progress in our practice of dry fasting and in our cellular hydration, we will naturally be able to dry fast longer. For now, and and I include myself in the for now, like I've now been on this path for 4.5 years, and yet, yes, I've done my longest dry fast was 54 hours, and I've done a couple of 48 hours, but most of my dry fasts are 24 and 36 hours, because it's serving me well, and because I feel like the minute that I feel like I'm pushing myself too hard, that is when, you know, I go, okay, I don't want to do that. I want to get my body to a place where it's naturally going to want to dry fast for 5 days. And of course, it's still going to be hard, but not stressful. And especially because in my case, my adrenals were so badly burned out that I'm very aware of keeping that fine balance of always lean towards loving yourself. And what does that look like? And at the same time, like, I've healed, I feel amazing, even without 5 days of dry fasting. And what does it matter if I only get to 5 days of dry fasting in 2 years or 5 years or 7 years for that matter? I'm on this journey. And that is what I suggest for everybody, because this journey is a journey. It's not a diet. It's not something that you can quickly fix yourself with. And it's why, as long as you have certain cravings, give into them. Go dive into it. And then suffer the consequences with full awareness and take the teachings without the beatings, because that is the trick. Take the teachings without the beatings. Can you love yourself when you are feeling shitty because of all the gluten or cheese or whatever you've eaten, and you're feeling sluggish and you feel the brain fog and you feel the slight depression kicking in, because that is what happens? Can you then sit with that and go, wow, what a lesson, what an exercise of awareness, because that is what the majority of people do, right? They are not aware. And then they blame life, they blame situations, you know, they go and criticize others, they point fingers, they judge. But meanwhile, it's all because they're fucked up nervous system, excuse the language. And that is really as simple as it is, because in a healthy, relaxed nervous system, we don't judge. I mean, I used to be so uptight and so judgmental and so critical. And I know I have so deeply let go and simply relaxed into the flow of life. And I feel like now I'm accepting of everything and everyone. But that's only because, doesn't mean that I need to choose to engage with certain people or practices, but I can accept that we all are at different places, and that just because I am where I'm at doesn't mean I'm better or worse. It's just this, I'm doing me, and other people can do them. But there's no more need for deep judgment or anger or outbursts. And that is because my nervous system now is finally, I'm sure there's more work to do, but it's at the point where I can just relax into who I am, into myself, into the understanding of how reality works, and that I don't need to change anything on the outside. I just need to do me. That's all. And everything else, if I do me authentically, continuously, everything else will sort its way out. Which brings me to the last point of how do we navigate conversations with friends around eating disorders and fasting, or even just around this lifestyle. And, you know, I've had huge issues with my parents, and not so much friends, because, you know, I sort of like, I think it's easier with friends to sort of say, well, look, I'm doing me, you know, if it doesn't suit you or if you don't agree with what I'm doing, don't do it. You know, that's kind of the position that I hold. But obviously with family, it's a little bit more difficult. But they're also, ultimately, I have simply come to the realization that any outside prodding and any outside triggers that come in forms of questioning and, you know, downplaying what we're doing is really not our business. It's all about them. And I've seen that over and over, because when I can sit at a dinner table with people and fast. I can even cook for people the most amazing food and be joyously serving it to people and fast. I don't need to partake, and I can take in the smells, and I watch you joyously eating the food, and that gives me just as much joy as eating it myself. So it's not like I'm sitting there, oh, poor me, I can't eat it. Great. Like, but right now I'm choosing to not to eat and I can still serve you. Can you stand that? Not you as in you, but you as in, you know, the family member that is sitting there with me or whatever. And that is, I've always seen, it is not my issue, it is their issue. Because what our process and our taking care of ourselves and our exercise of awareness does is it actually triggers their unawareness. It triggers them to start feeling and thinking into, where am I not being authentic in my self-care? Where am I simply unconsciously, you know, eating whatever? So it triggers questions in them that make them uncomfortable, and it obviously they don't want to go into, right? And we've all experienced that. We've all had that friend that brings up, you know, certain things. Like maybe a friend, I mean, I remember having gone through that, you know, like years and years ago, and maybe a friend all of a sudden like lost weight, went to the gym, looked amazing, and I felt uncomfortable. I was like, well, why are you feeling uncomfortable? Because you are not doing the same for you. And so all of a sudden you want to say, oh, you know, she's whatever, self-centered, she's, you know, whatever labels we want to do. Meanwhile, it's like, no, actually, it's bringing up your inadequacies. And so that is also, it's the beauty of, again, everything is interconnected. Nothing is ever living in isolation. So my suggestion is, on one hand, yes, it's not easy, but the medicine, the lesson of needing to then stand your ground with friends and family is how deeply are you committed to yourself? How deeply committed are you to this path? And how deeply are you committed to saying, this is just what I'm doing because it's serving me. And until it serves me, I'll continue. When it doesn't serve me, I'll stop. You know, or to really and honestly stand in your truth and say, don't worry, I've got this. You know, I'm old enough. You do you. And thank you so much for your concern. And if you want to look into what I'm doing, I can send you links or, you know, information, because it is a long story to explain, as you can see. But, you know, don't get derailed by them. At the same time, observe if their prodding makes you feel like, oh, well, I'll just leave it, you know. And then it's like, well, why are you leaving it? You're leaving it because you are using their discomfort, they're challenging you as an excuse to then go, oh, well, I'll just leave it. You know, I'll eat what they're having. And I've done that. I've done that too. But at some point we need to take responsibility for all of that, because that is the whole path that we are on, right? Self-awareness, we want to step into sovereignty. So all these are pieces of it. It's a new way of living. You know, it is a new life. And when I look back to where I am now, and we will discuss all of that in the interview with my husband, which we're going to do this weekend, we are living in a completely new reality, a completely new life. And it's so amazing to now look back and go like, oh my goodness, remember where we were 4 years ago compared to where we are now? Like, wow, you know, it's a completely new reality. And that is what's exciting, because inevitably by walking this path, which yes, it's not easy, but eventually you will have a new life. And it's not about, you know, creating it through hard work. It's about creating a new reality through constant awareness and creation. The picture that I get, it's a little bit like knitting your own world. You knit it and then you go, oh, I don't like this piece. This piece doesn't fit in here. Undo and then redo. And of course the undoing takes energy and goes like, oh shit, now I need to go and undo this thing, you know, which sometimes means losing friends, setting new boundaries with people. But when we start feeling into that, is the creative process of how we create our reality. And it literally anything is possible. If you want it, if you desire living in a certain way, you can have it. It's just a matter of sitting back and going, I wonder how I can knit this piece into the fabric of my reality. And then you feel it, and you knit it, and you create it, and then you go, yes, this is working. Okay, we knit some more, and then no, this little piece is not working. And we start getting better and better at fine-tuning and at catching ourselves when we make a little mistake, or when we start knitting something that doesn't fit the picture, and we don't let it run its course until we've done a whole thing. We actually catch it when it's right there. And then it becomes easier and easier and easier to undo, redo. And that is where we become flexible, and we really step into the flow of life. And that is when life becomes so exciting, because that is the eros of life, true life, eros force flowing through us. And we simply respond, create, observe, feel, notice. Is this what I want? Yes, no, move on, and that is what it is. It's that simple. And then there are no more questions, then there's no more decision-making process. It's just feeling and responding, no reacting. The others will still react, and that is the hard part, and sometimes the painful part, because you will see all these explosive reactions happening outside in your reality, and you go, oh dear, the more that I stand in my truth and in my knowing that this is who I am creating, explosive reactions will inevitably happen all around you. And all we can then do is go, thank you. Because every single explosive reaction is an energy release, which ultimately feeds your reality in a positive way, even when it's painful. So I will leave you with that, because it feels like I've already spoken forever. But I mean, these things, unfortunately, they are long and deep. And so, yeah, thank you so much, and till the next time. Bye.